We are committed to creating a safe and supportive space for our guests and listeners, and to provide information and tools that will help our listeners understand, manage, and overcome trauma. We understand that the healing journey can bring up challenging emotions. Therefore, we want to warn our audience that certain episodes may contain discussions or stories that could be triggering for some individuals. The content of the podcast is for educational and informative purposes only, and we encourage you to practice self-care and discretion while listening, and to reach out to a trusted support system or professional if you feel overwhelmed and need help on your healing journey. Emily, thank you so much for being here today. I'm excited about having you here today, and you're going to be sharing your book and your story, which your book is Rising from the Ashes, Reclaiming Your Life After a Traumatic Childhood. And then we're going to get
Yeah.
into how your healing journey, really. So tell us about
Yeah.
you.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. First of all, I am excited to be here. So about me, I am a, a farmsteader. I'm the mama of two beautiful babies and
Oh,
married to my best friend. Um,
oh.
Never thought that would happen when I was younger, but I didn't think that kind of love existed, but
Mm-hmm.
turns out it does.
Yeah,
Uh,
I felt the same way actually. I remember thinking, romance? It's all on TV.
yeah. Yeah. So I guess my journey really got started um when I was raised primarily by my paternal grandparents from the time I was 6 or 7 months old until I went off to university. There were some times in that span of time where I was living with my dad.
Mm.
And so one of my first core memories is standing at the bottom of my stairs, looking out the window, the front window of my grandparents' house at the time, waiting for my mom to come and see me. And she never showed.
Mm.
And I remember my grandmother consoling me as I cried and said, "Why doesn't she love me?
Mm.
Why doesn't she want me?" And it really kind of cemented in a belief that I needed to hustle and earn love. I needed to do things in order for me to receive love. When I was 6-ish, my dad got married to a woman who had a son of her own. And at that point in my life, I was a little girl who was really close to her dad. And we used to go do things together. We used to have great adventures. And so I wanted to go live with my dad. And um, those 18 months were the most traumatic I think I've ever experienced.
Living with your
Um,
father for 18 months.
yeah, living with my
Mm-hmm.
father and my stepmother and my stepbrother for 18 months. It, I don't want to say it's a mistake because it brought me eventually to where I am now, but
Mm-hmm.
it was it was a time where I was physically, sexually, emotionally, psychologically, all the different types and forms of abuse happened um, until one Sunday evening. I wasn't allowed to stay home on weekends. Um, so I was rotated around different family members' homes. I
At what
was
age, what's your age? How old are you at this point?
I was 6 or 7. I wasn't allowed to stay home.
I was thinking, yeah, 6 or 7. What do you do? At 6 or 7 years old, where do you go?
So some weekends I would be at my grandparents', some weekends I would be at an aunt, and some weekends I would be at my biological mom's house. So it was a weekend where I was at my biological mom's house, and she told me on Sunday night to go get my stuff ready, and something clicked inside of my 7-year-old body, and I said, I'm not going back there. I'm not going back. I'm going to do what I need to do to not go back. So I went in my sister's room, um, and packed up my bag and hid under her desk in the chair hole and put my bag in front of me so nobody could see me. It felt like forever. But I was committed to not being found. Eventually, my mom did notice the bag in the chair hole and found me. And I said, I'm not going back. She's like, oh, well, okay, what am I supposed to do? So that night I ended up back at my paternal grandparents. Um, and it was very much like it happened. Now it's not happening, and we just need to move on with our lives as if nothing happened.
So you didn't say anything to her about why you didn't want to go?
I I I believe I said they hurt me.
Okay.
Something pretty vague.
Yeah.
Um, my brother hurt me, my stepmom hurt me. Um, and so I I had escaped, and we didn't talk about it. It was pushed under the rug, and there were things that happened that my dad didn't know about until I wrote my book in 2021.
Okay. So you never had a conversation with
We
him?
never talked about it.
Nobody did.
Nope, we didn't
Not
talk
even
about it.
you.
Nope, we never talked about it. We talked about how they hurt me, but there was no help. There
Hmm.
was no working through feelings. There was no validation of course you're struggling right now because you just went through hell.
Hmm. Did they at least acknowledge that there was abuse?
No, I remember an educational assistant at the time of my elementary school. Um, she knew that things weren't right. I
Hmm.
was so skinny and pale. I looked like a child who lives on the street, who doesn't get proper nutrition.
Hmm.
I had dark circles around my eyes, and my stepmom fought with my elementary school to have me held back in first grade. And they did it because they were cowards, in my opinion.
Hmm.
Um, and she and my aunt were talking about it, or she and my grandmother were talking about it, somebody, and she said, there's nothing we can do. We can't report it. We can't do anything. There's nothing we can do. But other adults knew about it. Other adults chose not to
Hmm.
do anything.
Hmm.
Nobody
Yeah.
saved me. I saved me.
Hmm.
The good Lord above saved me.
Yeah. You and I are in the same, yeah, same place. Yep. Nobody helped me either. Mm-mm.
So, um, we didn't talk about it in my teenage years, and through my 20s. I dealt with um, anxiety and depression. I thought I was a waste of space. I thought nobody wanted me. I thought nobody loved me. And we don't talk about our feelings. So
Hmm.
push it down, push it down, push it down, push it down. And of course, that bubbles up and causes more anxiety and depression
Oh, yes.
because you're ignoring it.
You're trapping it in your body. You're
Yeah, you're
storing it
trapped.
and trapping it in your body.
Yes, you are.
Hmm.
So, um, when I was in my mid 20s, I met my now husband, and I was like, okay, yeah, but I don't want kids. And so as time went on, I came around to the idea of one. Let's have one kid. And we struggled. We struggled a lot.
Let me ask you why did you make that decision? I'm curious. I think I know, but I'm curious. Like why was your first response that you didn't want to have kids? Why?
I didn't want to be responsible for hurting somebody
Yeah, I thought about that
the
too.
way that the way that I was hurt.
Yeah.
Um, so I went to doctors and whatnot, and I was just medical gaslit out of offices. You're fine, you're normal, blah 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 blah.
Mm-hmm.
Um, until I went to a naturopath who explained how my stress response was causing the infertility that I was experiencing, was causing all of the things that I was experiencing,
Mm-hmm.
and gave me the stepping stones that I needed to help my body heal. And it's
Mm.
amazing to me because we tried for a year and a half before going to and endured a miscarriage before going
Mm.
to um, the naturopath. And once I had the knowledge and the stepping stones that I could support my body in healing, my body did what it was supposed to do.
Mm-hmm.
And so I became a mama in September of 2018. And that is where my healing really starts because I had this beautiful baby girl who looked exactly like me as an infant,
Oh.
which is adorable, but also incredibly triggering.
Yeah. Yeah.
And my stress response was like, get the heck out of here. It's not safe. And meanwhile, in my head, I'm saying, no, I can't run because if I do, I'm going to hurt my baby girl and my husband the way that I was hurt.
Mm-hmm.
And I wouldn't be able to live with myself. So I knew that I could listen to the voice. Sure, that's an option. Or I could stay and figure it out and heal. So I chose the latter. I chose to stay and figure it out and work on healing. And I made a commitment to myself and to God. God, if you get me through this, I will reach my hand back into the fire and help other mamas because I know I'm not special enough to be the only one experiencing this.
Mm-hmm. That's a good way
And
to put it.
what I've come to know is that it's far more common
Mm-hmm.
than people let on.
Mm-hmm. Are you referring to the infertility issue or just the
I'm
whole?
referring to mamahood as triggering.
Oh, yes.
But the infertility is also happening and
Mm-hmm.
women are not being told the real reason of their infertility.
Exactly. I have actually one of my earlier guests, Gabriella Rosa, is an infertility specialist, and this is exactly what she helps with, is helping couples who have had trauma in the past and
Mm-hmm.
help them to heal so that they can become pregnant. And she's helped people all over the world. And it is so interesting to me that so tell us about that a little bit because like what were some of the things that they did to help you through that?
So the way that my body was working at the time was I was estrogen dominant, but not like crazy. My cortisol was too high,
Yeah.
which which prohibits other hormones from functioning,
Mm-hmm.
and then my progesterone was really really low.
Okay.
So I took a supplement called Videx, chasteberry extract, which works gently with your body to boost your progesterone to support pregnancy,
Okay.
and ovulation and
Mm-hmm.
all of those processes.
Brings your
So
body into balance, it sounds like, so that it can
yeah,
work properly.
yeah. And then I also was using different vitamins and minerals that my body was depleted of.
Yeah, yeah. Because that
because
cortisol will just tear you up. I mean,
it
it's supposed to
it
be a shot. It's not supposed to be an all the time.
yeah, yeah. Cortisol will actually deplete your body of anything good,
Hmm. Yeah.
which creates an environment for disease and
Inflammation.
inflammation and all kinds of not so pleasant things.
Hmm. Did she have you
Um,
do any breath work, meditation, anything like that to help you? Or did you implement that?
I discovered breath work later on.
Okay.
Um, I also to help to help clear my body out, I did a candida diet, which was very difficult. Um, just because of the limitations around what you can actually eat in a candida diet, but it cleared all the gunk out of my system. And I like dropped weight like it wasn't even funny. Like one day my pants, I could put on my pants and they would stay up, and then the next day, by the end of the
Funny.
week, my pants were falling down. I was like, "Oh my."
This is really working. But it wasn't just getting rid of weight. It was getting
No,
rid of
no,
toxins
it
and
was getting rid of all the junk.
hmm
So, um once my daughter was born, I really started focusing on working through the the minefield of emotions. And
hmm
I learned it took me a long time to realize that I am not my mother and my daughter was not me.
mm
And understanding the the separation
hmm
was huge.
Yeah.
Was huge for me because at first I couldn't see it.
It was
I
probably automatic, right?
Yeah.
Like you had to have the self-awareness to realize that, right? So it
Yeah.
was just automatic that you kind of stepped into that, which I'm discovering that we all kind of do. We just kind of step into what we know without
Mhm.
self-awareness.
Mhm. And then after I had that realization, it was like, okay, so if I'm not my mom and my daughter is not me, then I have the power to make different choices. I have the power to choose something different. And that doesn't invalidate whatever choice was made back in 89 or 90.
Right.
Now is a different story,
A news story.
a new story.
Hmm.
And so I discovered um, what needed to be healed. I discovered that there were bits and parts of me that I had pushed down and buried for so long,
Hmm.
um, that I that were calling to be healed, but I didn't have the awareness. I didn't know I needed it.
Yeah.
So I've really been focusing a lot on healing my nervous system,
Yeah.
um, because that was a hot mess,
Hmm. Me too.
and healing my digestive system
Hmm.
because because they go hand in hand.
They do. The stomach and the mind are very connected as well. And when your
Yeah,
digestive system is out, that's the brain fog. Yeah, that creates a lot of problems for your brain.
yeah. I've spent a lot of time learning how to listen inwardly
Hmm.
instead of all this out here in the outside of me,
Yes.
and connecting when stressful situations come up, which they do, it's part of life. Well, okay, so that stressful thing happened and I reacted in this way, and now this is happening in my body.
Hmm.
And making a chain understanding the domino effect.
Right. So you're basically talking about when you're getting triggered,
Yeah.
right? You're now doing what I've talked about so many times, and you're able to recognize it because of the self-awareness. You're able
Mm-hmm.
to take a pause. You're able to assess it. And feeling it in your body is really important. That's something that I'm implementing now, and it's really uncomfortable, I'll just say, but it
Yeah.
works. But you have to release it. And then you're able to make a proper response. You're not going to make
Mm-hmm.
that triggered response. You're going to make a clear, healthy response.
Yeah. Yeah. So the process of writing my book was one that was filled with anxiety because I didn't
Mm-hmm.
know how people were going to react. And
Yeah.
I didn't know how much I wanted to pull the curtain back. So my approach in writing Rising from the Ashes was more about not not shining the light on me as a hey, look at me, look what I did kind of book, but it's a here's a bit of my story. Here are these things that I discovered that I needed to work on at the beginning of my journey, and you probably need to work on them too.
Mm-hmm.
And here's how they impacted my life or how they could impact your life.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not a woman of a lot of words. The book is short. But when I re-released the book in September of 2023, I also released a workbook that goes
Mm.
along with it. And the workbook is the practical, okay, you've read it. Now let's work through it. Let's put pen to paper. Let's do something. Because an idea or a concept is great,
Right.
but if you don't do anything with it, it's not going to help you.
Right. Right. It can, yeah. You can know how to drive a car by reading a book, but until you get in the car and drive it and experience it.
Exactly. Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. And then the reception of my book when I told my family the title, um, there was a great deal of friction. It
Yeah.
it removed some relationships.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I was told I was the scum of the earth by a couple of people. Um, and there were some things that needed to be talked through with other people. And my grandmother was one of them. And we had a conversation, and she's read my book twice in one sitting. So she sat down twice and read the book from cover to cover.
Is this the grandma you lived with or
Yeah,
that you were really close with? Mm.
yeah. And she
And
says, Emmy, it's really good.
oh,
And I said, thanks, Nan.
I know, it's interesting how families respond because, my family didn't know. They knew there was something going on, but they didn't know the depth of it. It's such a secret thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know how they're responding about my podcast. I don't really have connections with them, but there is that thought of, oh, how are they going to respond? And then what overrides that is probably what overrides your thought is, hey, if my story can help one person,
Yep.
it's worth it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah,
But,
I'm
we
not,
have to expose this.
yeah. When I was when I was 6 years old and I was living in the depths of my trauma, I was I was seeing a child psychologist for educational purposes. They were doing some testing because I was struggling to learn how to read. Um, they never figured out what was wrong.
That's from the
Um,
trauma, I'm sure.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
trauma. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Um, anyway, I remember one day, it was a warm spring day, and I remember walking across the parking lot into the office and thinking as I walked across the warm parking lot, someday I'm going to help kids like me.
At 6 years old?
Yeah, I was 6 or 7. Someday I'm going to help kids like me because no kid deserves to feel like this from their parents. They didn't
Mm-hmm.
ask to be here.
That's a lot of wisdom in a 6-year-old.
Oh man.
That's
And
a
at that
really
point
tender
I
heart too.
I didn't know how it would look.
Yeah.
So I thought for a while, I said, I'll be a child psychologist. And then, you know how that phase in high school, well, I don't want to be in school for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
I I learned how many years of education a child psychologist needs to go to school, and I was like, yeah, maybe I'll do something else.
Yeah.
Maybe there's another way. Um, so I ended up as a public school teacher for 6 years, and now I use that part of my education in a different way.
Mm-hmm.
And I focus primarily on trauma surviving mamas because
Mm-hmm.
there's not enough support in our society for trauma survivors, let alone trauma surviving moms.
We're learning so much now about trauma. It's just, I mean, I'm doing so much research, it's unbelievable. And I'm just uncovering so much that we're learning about trauma. And, there's the physical part of the trauma that is stored in your body. There's the
Mm-hmm.
generational trauma that is passed down, which is probably what, our families have experienced, right? Because I know
Yeah.
my parents both were, went through trauma themselves, and just how it affects your body. And how I lived with it for years, and it has absolutely taken a physical toll on my body. I've had numerous surgeries, and what's interesting is most of them are from my like chest up. It's my
Mm-hmm.
neck, it's my back, it's my shoulders, you know, and and as much as seems scary, the empowering part of it is there is a lot more stuff out there now that can help us work through this so we don't have to live with it, that we can have the awareness and we can
Mm-hmm.
work through this stuff and get this stuff out of our system and get it out of our body and not transfer it down, our legacy. And so to me, that's really empowering. And so what are some of the tools that you use in your life that helps you manage, work through this, get through sometimes our daily life?
So when I was just starting out, my naturopath put me on, um, he introduced me to ashwagandha, which
Okay.
helps it's an adaptogen. It helps calm anxiety. And there are so many different adaptogen blends that you can use for anxiety. That I would take when I felt the anxiety building, and I knew that if I didn't take my ashwagandha or whatever adaptogenic herb to help bring that down and manage it physiologically,
Mm-hmm.
it was going to bubble over as an emotional outburst or something. So
Right.
I used, and I keep it on hand. I use another blend that has ashwagandha in it. It's called Adrenal Pro, and that supports your adrenals,
Yeah, which is
which is
huge in this.
huge,
Those
which
get
is
shot.
huge.
And, when you're in high anxiety all the time, your adrenal glands are going to get shot.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. Outside of that, we've gone very heavily into a non-toxic type of lifestyle.
Mm-hmm.
So watching what chemicals we are exposing ourselves to in our household products, in the food that we eat, in personal care products, like
Mm-hmm.
all of that stuff. And then my daily practice is journaling.
Mm-hmm.
Because for me, using my voice as a child was not a safe thing to do.
Yeah. So many of us
Um,
lost our voice from the childhood
yeah.
abuse. Mm-hmm.
I remember when I think I was like 9 or 10 years old, the first time I told my grandmother I didn't want to be alive anymore. And she looked at me and she goes, "Don't talk that way. We
Mhm.
don't talk that way." So
Yeah.
I stopped talking that way and just kept it in. Anyway, so I have come to a place where when I get my journal and the pen in my hand, words, it's my safe place, and words can just flow and there's
Mhm.
no judgment. It just, it comes out. And I've written down things in my journal that I would never say out loud to
Mhm.
anybody. And I've read them back, and waterworks,
Mhm.
like a waterfall.
Yes. That is
And
powerful, is reading back some of your journals. Yes.
yeah, and you
Mhm.
know, in those instances, I have cried so hard it hurt.
Oh,
But it was
cleansing.
getting, it was releasing it.
Mhm.
I I wrote it down. I had a good cry, and then I was able to work through it and move past it. And it wasn't an issue anymore.
Let me ask you one question, because I love how brave you are, and I'm with you in writing down whatever, and don't, there's no rules, right? And
Mhm.
we've got people though that worry about, oh my gosh, but what if somebody gets my journal?
Mhm. I
How do you
understand that.
work? Yeah, I mean, how do you work past that? How did you work past that?
Um for a long time I hid my journal. Um but now I I live I keep my journal on my living room coffee table, and nobody touches it. My
Hmm.
husband respects my space. My kids don't go near it. And there is an understanding in my household, and I know that I'm blessed for having this because not everybody does. That that is that's mine, and you don't go in there.
It's off limits.
It's off limits. That's where that's where mama writes her stuff. And if there's something that's come up that I want to share, I'll share it with you. I will
Hmm.
read to you from what I've written. Um, but you don't go snooping through my journal. Um, there are many ways to journal. You don't have to have a physical notebook. You can password protect an app on your phone.
Hmm.
You can password protect voice notes on your phone if you want to go to a private space and talk to your phone. I've done that too.
Yeah,
When I
I've
was
done that one too.
when I've been like home alone, the rare instance now where I'm
Hmm.
home alone, and I'll sit on the couch and I'll push record and I'll just talk, and the tears come forth then too.
Hmm.
Um,
There's something
but
so
it's
powerful about getting the words out of our head and either on
mhm.
paper or out. There's something
Yeah,
very powerful.
it gets it out of your body so that it's
Hmm.
no longer stored energy,
Right.
stuck energy.
Yep.
So
Absolutely.
if if you need to get the emotions out somehow, because they will manifest in some way to get out, whether it's a way that you prefer or not.
Yes. And the timing might not be great either
Yeah.
when it
Yeah.
decides to show up. Hmm.
Yeah. So my recommendation is to find a safe space, whether
Hmm.
that's a journal. For me, it was a journal. And like last year, I got a 400-page journal from Walmart, and I just about filled it in a year.
Wow.
I wrote a novel, and someday my kids might publish it, but I don't think they will.
A
Um,
lot of
um,
healing. A lot of healing.
oh yeah, yeah. And it's a judgment-free space, but
Right.
you need to have that.
And that's a really good point too, is don't have judgment against yourself when you're doing this. Have curiosity.
Yes. Yes.
No judgment. No
No
judgment at
judgment.
all.
No judgment.
Just curiosity. Ask yourself questions. I mean, that's one of the ways that I journal is I ask myself questions
Mm-hmm.
and then I respond.
Yeah. I will oftentimes write a question down and then leave it. And later that day or the next day, I'll find an answer to it.
Right. Right. In the meantime, you're processing and you're
Mm,
figuring it out. And yeah, and then you come up with the answer. Yeah, I've done that too. Something similar.
yeah.
I'm liking this. So do you meditate? Do you have a
I have
meditating practice?
I have a hard time meditating. I've tried it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I struggle to turn my brain off.
I know
I
that's
haven't gotten that that muscle strong enough yet.
yeah.
I struggle to turn my brain off. And
Yeah.
the season I'm at right now in life with two small kids, there's there's not a whole lot of time to meditate where there's not somebody, "Mommy, I need this. Mommy, I need that."
Yeah.
Um, but I've also found that exercise
Right.
helps. It gets the energy out.
Exactly. That's a thing that I have found too. And when I'm stressed, I have found that the thing I need to do is move, move, move,
Mhm.
move. Sitting still is not good for me. It actually I've noticed as I'm paying attention more is that that's when my stomach and stuff will get really upset. Is if I'm
Mhm.
stressed and I'm not releasing that stress, whether like
Mhm.
I even have a little trampoline just outside my office here. And sometimes I'll just go jump on that just to get that energy out if I can't go and do a walk. But walking, riding my bike, and getting on the trampoline are big ones to get me moving and get that energy out.
Yeah, I like lifting heavy things. I mean, relatively heavy things. I'm no bodybuilder, but challenging myself, I might
Yeah,
complain the next day because my muscles are sore, but um
it hurts so
it
good.
it it gets me out of my head because if I sit and focus on whatever is causing me stress or anxiety, that's where the spiral comes in.
Right, right,
And then it's the end of the world. And I got from I'm annoyed with my husband to it's the end of the world and I need to get a divorce. But
right.
that's
The overthinking.
overthinking and
Yeah.
all of that stuff. So exercising and journaling are huge.
And you mentioned breathing. You said you now have a breathing, which
Yeah.
is that is vital as well. That is to me because you can use breathing exercises anytime.
Yeah.
Like you don't have to pull out a piece of paper to write. Like you can do the breathing exercises wherever you are and whatever's going on, and it will help.
Yeah. Yeah, it does. My favorite breathing technique that I use when I'm feeling like I need to calm down
Mm-hmm.
is the 557 breathing technique. And if I'm laying in bed and I do that to help shut my brain down,
Mm-hmm.
calm my brain down, I'm asleep before the the 2 minutes is up
Yeah.
because it taps into my sympathetic
Mm-hmm.
and gets me out of the parasympathetic and I'm I'm out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it gets your brain thinking about something else.
Yeah.
I learned this trick and it actually works because I am an overthinker and it's hard to shut it off sometimes. And sometimes most of the time I feel like I can kind of manage it, but sometimes, maybe I'm tired or whatever and it feels like it's managing me, is I'll go, wonder what I'm going to think about next. That it works. I'm not kidding you. When my mind is just going, I'm like, I wonder what I'm going to think about next. And then all of a sudden my brain just like shuts down for a minute. It gets it to stop. It's almost like we've got two border collies, and sometimes you have to really distract them kind of loudly in order to get their
Mhm.
attention to snap them out of it. And that's kind of what that does for me is it snaps me out of that loop I'm in that I don't feel like I can manage any other way. And
Yeah.
then the other thing I do, and this is at night, I don't usually have a problem going to sleep, but I'll wake up and then I have a problem going back to sleep. Is usually my problem. And I start counting,
Yep.
just slowly counting. And I usually don't even get to 30. So those are some of the tricks that I've done that have helped me.
Yeah. Yeah, those are helpful.
Yeah, I thought I'd put them out there again. Never hurts, right?
Yeah.
So, what do you want to leave our audience with?
I I would like to leave them with a small tidbit of encouragement. I was talking a couple of weeks ago with a whole a holistic doctor who works with people dealing with autoimmune disease.
Mm,
And he said something so profound to me. He said, if your body doesn't know, if you grew up in a constant stress environment, a chaotic environment, an abusive environment, and your stress response has been turned on for a prolonged period of time, and it doesn't know what calm feels like,
hmm
you need to teach it.
Oh, dang, that's good and true.
So, yeah. So, I know that as trauma survivors, we tend to have a really hard time with giving ourselves grace,
Hmm
especially in the day-to-day mundane life, doing all the things and getting all the things done, checking off the to-do list,
hmm
healing, and healing is not linear. Um, and we, or at least I do, tend to beat ourselves up in mamahood.
Oh yeah.
Your nervous system doesn't know what calm feels like. So of course, motherhood, day-to-day life is going to be exhausting
hmm
emotionally.
hmm
It's going to be hard. Of course it is, because your nervous system doesn't know what calm feels like.
And that's exactly the way I raised my son, is in
Mhm.
that state because, and I had no idea. And you are right.
So give yourself grace. If you are putting one foot in front of the other every day and you are trying your best to break out of the cycle, to give your child an experience that you weren't blessed to have, give yourself grace. Know that you are doing your best and it's going to be okay.
hmm That's huge because we are really hard on ourselves. I remember the day that I recognized the voice in my head that was so hard on me, and it had been
Mm,
screaming at me for years. And I remember one
mhm.
day I just happened to turn around and there she was. I saw her and I called her out and I kicked her out of my head as much as I could because it was abusive.
Yeah. Yeah, I did a podcast episode a couple of weeks ago speaking with a podcast guest on my podcast, the Mamahood After Trauma podcast. And we were talking about how to overcome your abusive brain chatter.
Mm,
And it's
that's a good
huge,
subject. Yeah, that's a whole
huge.
podcast. Yeah, that's a huge podcast right there. I might do something like that too, but it's true. It's chatter. It's
Yeah.
constant. And and it's just I just remember how empowered I felt when I realized that I was an overthinker. Because
Mm-hmm.
I did that all my life. Oh my gosh, I thought stuff for, something would happen and I would think about it for not just days, but weeks and sometimes months.
Mm-hmm.
It just felt like it was kept popping up, kept popping up, kept popping up, and I couldn't get it out of there. And just having the knowledge
Yep.
that, oh, I'm an overthinker. And oh, I don't have to just be at the whim of all my thoughts, that I can actually, you know, be empowered and and manage it.
Yeah.
I can't control it completely, right? You can't stop the thoughts, but you can certainly learn how to manage them better.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, this has been really great. How could our audience reach out to you? We'll have all this, of course, up, on YouTube and everything, but how can people reach out to you if they wanted to?
So if you want to connect with me, the best way for you to do that is on Instagram at emily.cleghorn.coach. And then on my website, home.mendedmamalife.ca.
I love it. Well, thank you so much. This has been great. And, I wish you were around when I was a new mom. It would have been much easier, I think. But thank goodness you're around now and you're paying it forward and you're helping. And thank you for that.
Oh, thank you.